How to tell if you're staying in a safe neighborhood. So this is a free resource called Community Crime Map. It's produced by a company called LexisNexis. And actually look and see if you're living in a safe neighborhood or if you're moving to a safe neighborhood by just typing in the city that you're traveling to here in the map. And when I search for Killeen, Texas, you can see here it brings up a map. Not all cities are actually producing crime data. So you can see Harker Heights doesn't actually report at all on LexisNexis. Cove also doesn't report on LexisNexis. So it makes it somewhat difficult to tell, if you're what type of crime you're experiencing. However, you can look at other resources. There are, crime websites and stuff like that that they give you general aggregate data like Neighborhood Scout. This is not going to be as detailed unless you actually pay for the neighborhood. But what you can see is that here they do start to report on the crime and stuff in, like for example, if I click on Harker Heights, you would see a general overview of like expensiveness, crime, or the price of real estate, I should say. And it kind of correlates with the older properties. They tend to have a little bit more crime. It doesn't break it down though into what types of crime. So you don't have, your violent crime versus like petty crime. But this tool actually does show you violent versus petty crime. So what you can do is go in here into filters. You can filter based on things that are concerning to you, like drugs, narcotics. If we just go ahead and deselect all the layers and we put in drugs, narcotics, and we go back, let's say a year, then we're going to hit search. We do have to hit apply actually. So we got to hit this apply button, and what it'll do is it'll clear out all the other search criteria, and it'll just show us narcotics incidences that were reported with the police. So you can kind of see there's a concentration here near downtown within the last year. And as you zoom into an area, you'll start to see it kind of changes as you move around the map. So these areas that have like the numbers, those are going to be higher concentrations of narcotics. And what you have to do really is look at, what was the type of crime. So this is a controlled substance, group 2. This is marijuana under 2 ounces. This is marijuana. This is marijuana. This is controlled substance, marijuana, marijuana. So you can kind of get an idea of like, okay, this is probably a little bit more, they have probably a few more incidences of narcotics than say somewhere down here. So you can kind of tell that the further away from downtown you get, the less incidences of drug possession charges, I should say. So that's kind of how we review neighborhoods to determine if we want to A, manage in that neighborhood, and B, if we want to live in that neighborhood. We personally don't actually run properties or manage properties that are in neighborhoods that have high incidences of violent crime and or drug use. And there's basically, you can come here and you can just see that, alcohol violations, we can just disregard that because those are going to be like, public intoxication. If you look at alcohol violations, there's not going to be very many the further away from downtown you get. So you can kind of see that the concentration of public intoxication is going to be near the bars, basically. These are restaurants, and so you can kind of tell that like this is more of the downtown area. So this is old downtown Killeen. This is kind of newer developments and around the shopping mall. But if you zoom in on these different areas, you can tell that these are in neighborhoods actually. It's common to see public intoxication. Okay, that's of a minor. This is public intoxication on a road or an alleyway. So someone was drinking and driving. Again, drinking and driving. So, those are just some things to look out for. But, the things that are most concerning for us are going to be aggravated assault. That somebody assaulted somebody with a weapon. Simple assault is a person putting hands on somebody else. It doesn't necessarily have to be punching somebody or hitting somebody. It could be simply placing your hands on somebody. But it does also include punching somebody as well. Homicide, manslaughter, robbery, commercial, trespassing could be something of a concern. We have cameras on all of our properties. We also have it tied in with the police, so it monitors if there's any sort of fishiness going on. We also want to look at theft, vandalism. Kidnapping is not something that is usually on our radar just because it's kind of so rare to see that happen in subdivisions. But again, it's one of those things where it can happen. It's just not a very common occurrence. So as you can see, there's not very many reports of kidnapping, if any, within the last year, human trafficking, that sort of thing. So just going back to, again, we're not worried about commercial because, again, we're not you're not living in a commercial property. We would like to see burglary of a motor vehicle, simple assault, burglary of a residence, vandalism, and attempted homicide. DUIs could also be important if you have young children, them playing on the street. You want to make sure that the street is safe. And of course, sexual assault, theft this could be, credit card forgery or something like that. So same thing here with non-criminal. It's a civil charge. So this is kind of like a catch-all, so you can turn those on as well. Arson is obviously important. And then, of course, drugs and narcotics. Motor vehicle theft as well, if you want to make sure that, when you're parking on the street, that it is a neighborhood that has a lower incidence of that. And then, of course, traffic accidents would be, people crashing into things. So as you can see, the concentration is downtown, and as you zoom into different areas, you'll start to notice the map change a little bit. This is within the last year, so you can kind of tell that kind of on the south side of town, you have a lot lower incidences of crime, and if you kind of pop into a different neighborhood, you can kind of see where the concentration is. So you can see as you zoom in, it changes the layout and whatnot, but you can see there's a lot of burglaries of vehicles. These are actually car thefts, so theft of vehicle, theft of vehicle, theft of vehicle, and so on and so forth. These are burglary of a vehicle, someone broke into the car, driving while intoxicated, firearms discharge. This is towards a building or towards a person. This is criminal mischief. If you look up what is criminal mischief, damaging or destroying property, graffiti, skimming from a utility, diverting cable, or it could be somebody like stealing power or electricity. So it's not that serious of a crime. But again, we're looking at just like what are the major incidences of crime. You could even just filter out criminal mischief if you want, vandalism, because again, that's more like graffiti, spray painting. They can do it, like they can egg somebody's house and it would be considered criminal mischief if somebody wants to report that. But mostly what we're looking at is, burglary, theft of a vehicle, narcotics, murder, arson, assault, etc. So as you get kind of closer to downtown, you have a lot higher concentration. The further out you get, the lower the incidence of crime is. So as you can see over here in this neighborhood, this is the neighborhood that we're in. We had a few burglaries and one discharge of a firearm. Being a military town, probably there's a good 40, 50,000 people that work on post, and I would say a very large amount of people possess firearms. What you're looking for, though, is you're looking at this. So unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon. You want to watch out for those sort of things. Again, there's nothing wrong with people being rehabilitated. However, the unlawful carry of a weapon by a felon is something that we look out for. Again, we're looking for discharge towards a habitation or a building, and you can kind of see that there's a little bit more of a concentration here over off of Elms. So if we zoom in a little bit, you notice that there's a lot of burglaries in this area, right? And here over near Planet Fitness, this is a strip center, so there's a little pocket of burglary and crime that happens here. As you come down here on Bunny Trail, you get into this neighborhood. Our property's located right over here. So you notice that in the last year, we haven't had crimes be reported in these categories. So burglary of a vehicle, burglary of a residence, that's happening on a different street. And again, it's very localized in Killeen. What you want to also look out for is when did it last occur? So how much time is happening between these occurrences to really get a feel for, are you living in a safe-ish neighborhood? And safe neighborhood is for each person to determine on their own. Me personally, I wouldn't live in a neighborhood with a high concentration of aggravated assault, burglary, firearms discharge, narcotics, public intoxication. All those are kind of like a no good for me. Even in this brand new subdivision right here, you have theft of a vehicle, unlawful carry of weapons, aggravated assault, assault by contact, which is putting hands on somebody, burglary of a vehicle, duty on striking unattended vehicle. Someone was probably drunk and crashed into a vehicle, illegal dumping, which is throwing your trash, and driving while intoxicated. So the thing I like about Killeen that I don't get with Copperas Cove and I don't get with Harker Heights is that the two cities kind of promote themselves as being super safe, when in fact we used to live on a street over here in Harker Heights that we still actually have, and So we used to live on a street over here in Harker Heights that was, we felt like it was really safe. And when I was looking for a property that we were possibly interested in buying, I looked and I noticed that the house said that a person was murdered in it. And I did a little bit of research and found out that it was a shooting of a husband and a wife. The wife shot the husband, and he passed on. And the interesting thing is, I don't think that this is all of the data that's being reported, because the property was right here. Excuse me, right here. And you'll notice that in the last 5 years there was no murder here. And you could see I have everything turned on. I have it going back to 2020. If I go back to 2015, it seems like the crime is not being reported, because again, there's no murder record here, which is strange because I used to walk my dog this way up here on Trailcrest, and this is where the murder happened. And it was in the listing on the for sale sign, on the for sale listing. So I get the sense that Harker Heights is not reporting all the data, or if they are, then they're just reporting limited amounts of data. It's hard to believe that a city that is this close to Killeen, Texas, is only reporting this many incidences. So as you can tell, it looks like it's just not everything that's occurring. And if you look at the agency here, so this is the Nolanville Police Department. Nolanville and Harker Heights, they kind of overlap a little bit. If you go over here, Nolanville Police, Killeen Police Department. So again, it's Dale County Sheriff's Office. The Harker Heights Police Department, I don't believe, reports to this data service. And so all of these reports that you see are from other agencies working in Harker Heights. And that's why I feel like the best way to make a judgment, everybody's different, but the best way to make a judgment of, are you in a neighborhood that you feel is safe, is to look at other sources of data for specifically the Harker Heights area. So when you're shopping in Harker Heights for a place to live, whether it's short-term or long-term or something in between, just keep that in mind. And if you do feel so inclined, you can, of course, go to a site like this and say, come over here, look at Killeen Heights, Clifton Park, and buy the report, and then look at the actual crime report and see what that report tells you. The average rent price, for example, the uniqueness to the neighborhood, occupations, diversity, etc., etc. What I found to be the easiest way to judge a place to live is just to go over here to LexisNexis. And then you make your own decisions. Is the place is it located in a neighborhood that meets your criteria? And one other thing I will say about this is that keep in mind too that homicide is one of the things that most people are very concerned about. What I can tell you is that if you look at these actual locations, so there's a layering effect here. If you look at narcotics and homicide, so there's a concentration of narcotics and homicide happening in the same areas, right? There's a lot of drug use all over town, but if you look at where kind of the homicides and the narcotics happen, they tend to happen in similar areas. Like you don't have just like a random murder happening where there's no drug use. That being said, one of the things that I like to do is I like to always look into what actually was the reason. And so you see, like, here's a residence home, manslaughter. If you just copy this address right here and you go over here to Google and you search for this, Killeen, a lot of times what will happen is it will pull up the actual news article, right? So this is a murder-suicide. You could read about it, Karen Drive, domestic disturbance involving an armed suspect. Officers found the bodies of Tanisha Sedgwick and Walter Sedgwick, so they were married. It looks like justice of the peace, pronounced her dead. Police murder-suicide, so Walter also killed their 2 dogs, which is very unfortunate. It's very sad, and what that tells us is basically this person was suffering for quite some time, and they decided to take their own life and took other people's lives with them. So it's unfortunate, but that gives us a little bit more context to this specific incident. And you can see here as well, if we do this search again for Killeen, Sometimes you have to just type in murder. Man blamed victims for their own deaths. Okay, so this gentleman, he was charged with capital murder and a fatal shooting of his mother and his grandmother, which is very unfortunate. Son threatened to shoot her and had struck her when officers arrived. So it was a domestic dispute. So what I look for when I personally look for a place to live is I'm looking for, is this kind of an isolated incident? If we go here and we go back to, the last, say, 3 years or 2 years, how many murders are occurring in the last 2 years, right? In the last year. Is this a very common incident, or is this a more of a rarity, right? So you can see these are the total murders for the whole city. And keep in mind the population of Killeen is 250,000. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 people out of 250,000 that were murdered. And we're looking at what is the cause of that, right? If you go over here near more of the urban district, you can see Botanical Drive. We have murder, Killeen. A man was shot and killed. The victim was 18-year-old Octavian Kayshawn Tucker. The shooting was the 16th murder in Killeen. Police were called to the scene. They found him with a gunshot wound. They airlifted him to Mailer Scott and White. He was arrested. Zachary Stevens from Austin was arrested and charged with murder. He was taken to Killeen City Jail. So let's read this article real quick and find out what happened. So this is a commercial district, and this is like a group of homes that are a little bit on the older side, and it said they were notified that they'd been shot. So that doesn't give you very much information. So those are kind of the ones where we were a little bit concerned, because we kind of like to know the reason for the issue. But if you look at, over in this subdivision, what happened here, this is more than likely probably a murder-suicide, which again, we live in an area that has a high concentration of active and retired military. Possible murder-suicide. Found 2 men gunshot wounds who were not conscious. And it's very unfortunate, but the reality is that with military service, we have a higher incidence of people with PTSD. And so I believe that does contribute to these kind of issues. One man produced a handgun and shot the other one, then turned the gun on himself and took his own life. So again, it was I would say I can't make a declarative statement, but my opinion is that that's more than likely something he was contemplating. But it says here that police determined that this is an isolated incident between 2 neighbors. So again, as unfortunate as that is, what this reveals is basically that there's not, this is not like a drive-by shooting situation where, gang members are coming and lighting up a neighborhood. This is these incidences are few and far in between, but it is something to keep in mind when you're selecting a neighborhood to stay in. So the higher concentration of these other violent crimes like arson, assault, aggravated assault, those sort of issues, weapons violations, it seems that they correlate with where the murders are as well. So that being said, I hope that helps you make a clearer decision on where you may or may not want to live, or whether it's short-term or long-term. This is how I judge a place for my own family and for my own friends and relatives, whether or not I would place them there. So hopefully this video is helpful. If it is, feel free to reach out to us, give us a call. You can reach us at 866-665-1332. And again, you can go on to stayalbatross.com. Of course, you can view our listing. This is the home, and it's located in this neighborhood right here. As you can tell, right here next to the Walmart Supercenter. It's actually on this little pocket right here next to this elementary school. So that being said, you've got a Planet Fitness, you've got an Aldi, you've got a Walmart Supercenter, you've got a bunch of shopping right here. You're down the street from HEB. You're right next to the Killeen Airport. You're right next to the university. You've got the hospital right here. You've got Clear Creek Gate right here. You've got the other gate for Killeen entrance right there. You're a skip and a hop to highways. You've got Lowe's, Walmart, all within like a 5 or 10 minute drive. Urban Air Trampoline's a really fun place to take your kids. You've got the highway leading down here into Austin. It's about a 45 to an hour drive, just depends on traffic. So there's a lot of stuff in the neighborhood, and again, this is a really great neighborhood. Just be aware of where you're staying. So thanks so much for watching the video. Have a great day. Now, I wanted to do a quick little video just because I realized that I didn't address this particular instance here. So doing a quick search, you can see that this popped up here on the Daily Herald. Tyree Loop murder, an argument between friends. So it just says that basically this gentleman, Jacarius Pold and Datavius Smith were in an altercation at Datavius's home, and the two argued, and Pold was shot by Datavius, by Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith later shot himself, and the police were asking him to step out of the vehicle. He decided to shoot himself instead. No police officers fired their weapons, according to KPD. Lampasas is about 30 minutes west, and the Texas Rangers will conduct a death investigation. So, again, these are unfortunate when they happen, but it's one of those situations where it's like you have to make the judgment for yourself of whether or not that constitutes a not safe neighborhood. Me personally, I think that if there was 10 or 15 of these occurring every year in the same neighborhood, that I may choose a different neighborhood to stay in. But that being said, the concentration of these events is not what people, I guess, try to make Killeen out to be. My general rule for buying properties or managing properties is I look to try and stay on the south side of town. The properties tend to be newer. All the development is happening this way. This is the airport. They're basically building out all these little pockets right here. And so those tend to be newer homes. All of this is on development. This is all development. A lot of these houses as well tend to be much more expensive, and your rent tends to be higher in these neighborhoods over here. That being said, there's a lower concentration of murder, there's a lower concentration of drug use, there's a lower concentration of arson, assault, etc. So I'll let you be the judge for yourself, but just wanted to point that out as well, that again, this is one of our more sought after areas. Kind of south of the Stan Sluter Loop is where more of our clients reach out to us. These other neighborhoods, you can just search for yourself.